Uh, well, first of all, I've been around when Day got mad at Al Goshman. Well, you know, Al Goshman could be very crude, and Day would say, you know, you need to get some manners and act politely, you know. Like I went to a Cardini birthday party one night out in Brooklyn, and Al was in the living room where all the ladies were, while the men were in the dining room sitting around the table doing tricks for one another. And Al Goshman was in a big overstuffed chair with flour all over him from the bakery, like this, you know, laying, you know, snoring, and it was just, you know, and I shook him a couple times, you know, and then he went right back to it, you know. I mean, he was a guy that really was kind of uncouth, you know, and Vernon would get unhappy about that. Now, Vernon never showed anger to me. I don't ever remember a time when he did that. But he could get angry. But most of the time, he was so pleasant and so easygoing and laid back that you couldn't be mad at him. And he kind of strung people along, you know, the gotcha, reel 'em in thing. You know, he'd show you a card trick and say, well, someday when I show some signs of weakness, I'll tell you how I did that, you know. And then you'd never hear from him again about it. You know? I mean, he used to do that all the time. And Marlo had this thing about crediting everybody with it. You know, when did I first have this thought? Who did I show it to that proves I had it then? You know, and all of that stuff. And Vernon just couldn't be bothered with that. Vernon had the ability to take any trick that he saw and hone it up so that it had a dimension much greater than it had originally had once he took it to heart, you know. And I used to have talks with him about when to do moves, when not to do moves, those kinds of philosophical conversations. And I never had a conversation like that with Marlo. Marlo was more concerned with proving you did this and so on. And Vernon just kind of enjoyed the fruits of his labor, and, you know, didn't worry about who got credit or what.
What was Vernon doing when you first met him?
Well, he lived in New York, and he was working around. He was more or less known as a magician who worked for the hoity-toity. And in order to do that, you had to have a personality that the hoity-toity would let you in the room. You know, he was polite and had charm, and the women liked him because he was kind of leprechaunish around women, and they loved him, and he could be booked on those kinds of jobs. It takes a guy who has a certain kind of personality set to work those jobs, and Vernon matched that perfectly. And so he was doing that kind of thing when I met him. I wrote a story in my column in the magazine about he was coming back from England. Vernon was the kind of a guy that, you know, he might have made $500 something, but in 10 minutes he'd spend it, you know, for nothing, you know, and have nothing to show for it, you know. So he was back from England, and he was penniless, and so Lou Tannen put a sign up in his shop, Vernon Lectures, Saturday morning at 10, from 10 till 12, for the next 10 weeks or something like that, for $20 a visit. And this was the first Saturday, and it was a beautiful day like today. And I was standing with my wife out on the 41st Street side of the cafeteria entrance when this little red Triumph pulled up. And it wasn't the sporty one, it was the four-door. And he had brought this back on the boat with him he'd bought it in England. That's one reason he was out of money. And he pulled up and got out of the car, and he says, "Well, Margie," you know, he always liked Margie. And So, you know, we all were standing around there with three or four other magicians all talking. And I said, well, where did you get the car? You know, he said, I brought it back on the boat. He says, here, I'll take you for a ride. Margie, get in. So she says, well, I'm trying to go. Yeah, well, they can't do it till I get back. Come on. So she got in the car, and this zap, they go down 41st Street, heading for 7th Avenue. You know, and it's 5 till 10. You know, and there are like 70, 80 guys up there waiting for him to show up. And some of the guys that are on the sidewalk go in. They go up there and they tell everybody, last we saw of Day, he was taking off with Harry's wife, you know. And anyway, she said they drove way up into Harlem.
Oh, wow.
from 41st Street to Harlem. That's, you know, what, 30 blocks or something. And drove through Central Park and you know, and angling, and they were gone like 25 minutes or something. Meanwhile, all the guys just got sick and tired of this crap, you know, and left, which made Lieutenant mad a wet hen, right? So, you know, all of a sudden, here comes Vernon pulling back a mark. He says, I never had a more harrowing experience in a car in my life. You know, this man can't drive.